Good morning, this is Angela with Parkrose Permaculture. I'm down next to my woodshed this morning, working on some yard chores. I just took the chickens and ducks a snack. And I am down here pruning up some of my spent roses. So when roses are still partially blooming, but some of the blooms have gone over, I tend to just take the plant and shake it a little bit, and the dead spent blossoms will fall off. But when the rose is completely done, then I prune it back. And I don't spray my roses with anything. I do feed them quite a bit with organic fertilizer and feed the soil around them. So some of my roses are in full bloom and looking spectacular. Pan around here. And then some are done. So I've just finished pruning all the ones that are done for now, and some of them will rebloom later in the year, and some are just once bloomers. So I wanted to just give you a little view of what I'm doing for my chores this morning. I had gotten some questions about how much time I spend in the garden every day. Typically it's a couple hours, but I tend to spend a portion of that time just looking over everything and kind of following that permaculture principle of observe and interact. So the more I'm observing, the more I'm noticing patterns, and I'm catching problems early. So here we're down in a filbert guild. This was a squirrel planted tree that was here when we bought the house, and I'll talk about it in a minute. I have my black currant. I've said before, I love black currants. I love the smell of them. I love how productive they are. I find that black currants are less prone to gooseberry fruit flies, gooseberry maggots, than my red and pink ones. I really love black currant jam. So today I'm just spending a few minutes observing down in this part of the garden. This is a bed that I made and have taken things out that weren't working here. So I'm a big fan of repurposing things, obviously, and I collected a bunch of bottles for years, and so I have a lot of bottle borders in beds I want to be permanent. So here I'm going to be adding something. I just don't know what yet. I took out some herbs that weren't working well here. I have a brand new Hebe back here, which is good bee food, and it will get big and fill in part of this area. It should be, maybe 2.5 by 3 feet when it's fully mature. I have some Crocosmia that I don't know how it ended up here. Crocosmia has a way of doing that. And I have some native yarrow, and I have some sea kale, which I am trying to get to really fill in. I love the gray leathery foliage. The flowers make great fritters. The root is also good as a roasted veg. So we're going to go here into my raspberry patch. I've had the chickens in here the last few days. I kicked them out to make this video because I didn't want any escapees while my dogs are in the yard. So you can see I kind of like in pruning, I throw down some of my rose prunings. They'll all get thrown in corners of the yard to decompose. But since my kids and I tend to be barefoot, I try not to put them too much in the paths. So I did a video a few days ago. Back here you can see the raspberries have all pretty much finished blooming. I did a bumblebee video and there were a lot of bumblebees back here, but they're all pretty much done blooming and are all pollinated and should be maturing. These are fall gold raspberries, so these berries will be a little bit smaller, and the crop they produce in September, October will be quite a bit bigger. There's my chicken coop, which is very large, larger than I needed. And if I had to do it over again, I would not put it so far back in the yard. And I would also make it a little smaller, but it's a great trellis. So it has a Concord grape up over it. And then I bought a strawberry, I want to say Strawberry Fields, but that's not right. David Austin rose that is just starting. I've planted it against an old busted chair, wooden chair. And I'm going to trellis it up and over the side. So let's get back to this section of the garden. This is this filbert, and we coppice it for firewood and for stakes. So hazels and filberts have really long, straight stakes. And when we first bought the house, I thought about taking this tree out, shrub out, but it really is so useful. So I prune off these branches and I cut them up and I use them for bedding in the duck house and the chicken coop in the fall. And every year I take about a third to half of the long branches and I use them as firewood. So I usually wait until they're about as big around as my forearm or even a little bigger, and then I cut them off at the base and create what's called a stool. And by doing that, this plant basically will live forever versus if you cut a tree down once, right? It's done. When you coppice, you sustainably harvest. So we get enough wood out of this one tree for probably a week's worth of fires in the winter because hazel burns pretty hot. And then all of the little end pieces and prunings I can use for kindling. Also, we cut some for stakes in the garden and for walking sticks. It's a great first early wood for kids who are learning how to whittle. So my kids love to whittle things out of these. So this is using a resource that we don't get very many nuts off of it because the squirrels here tend to decimate all of the nuts, which is really frustrating. And I haven't bothered to net it and go through the process of trying to be serious about getting a nut crop from it. I maybe should think about changing my mind. We'll see. We get a lot of walnuts from my parents' walnut trees, but I really haven't worked to do the kind of management it requires to get hazelnuts here. I just don't want to do battle with the squirrels. So I realize this permaculture plant is a food crop, but for us it is a wood crop and plant support crop, and also provides shade in this corner of the garden. Now, I wouldn't have planted it here on my own. Again, it was here when we bought the house. I would have picked a different location instead of right up against my neighbor's fence, because that means I'm constantly having to take it back off the fence when it hangs in their yard. It does create a nice sheltered area here in the summer for the chickens. So this part of the yard, neighbor dogs are barking and so are mine. Sorry about that. This part of the yard here, you can see the chickens have been eating the dock in here, but they don't love it. It's not their favorite, but if I deprive them of other things, they will come in and they will nibble on it. It's been raining really hard, so you can pull up the dock pretty easily. And then I just make sure it doesn't get reburied because it will regrow. And then I just throw it there and let it break down, chop and drop, or pull and drop. If you chop it, it will just come back. So dock is something that just proliferates everywhere as a weed here, but has medicinal and food uses. I tend to say it's like a zombie apocalypse food because the seeds are edible and the leaves are edible, but I don't think either of them taste very good. So we've been discussing this area of the garden here, my eldest child and I, because we've been thinking about getting meat rabbits. If any of you have meat rabbits, I would love to hear your experiences. I know how to butcher them, but I've never kept rabbits. We're thinking of getting a buck and a doe and breeding them a couple times a year and then freezing the meat. So just because we're looking for a sustainable source of meat, we buy a cow share every year from a local grass-fed, grass-finished cow, and butchered at a local abattoir that's about 35 miles away, so fairly local, the most local we can get here in Portland. And that gives our family about 2 to 3, depending on the size of the cow, 2 to 3 pounds a week of organic grass-fed meat, plus organ meat, plus bones for stock. So that's not very much. We're a family of 6. So that gets us like a roast or like tacos once a week. I would love to buy a share of a pig. Oh, there's a little spider right on my hand here. Okay. Oh, now you're going to hang out on the camera. Let's move you back over here to the raspberries. Little friend. Okay. Lots of baby spiders right now in the garden. Okay, so I'm thinking about getting meat rabbits here and building some hutches. It's shaded. I know rabbits don't like a lot of heat. Then the issue becomes, is my family going to be okay with eating fluffy bunnies that we raised? So just something that we're thinking about. always thinking about adding things in projects and increasing our sustainability and not relying on the industrial food system. We all know that right now there's a lot of issue with the industrial food system and the ethics of exposing workers to a lot of risk so that we can eat meat that is raised in a really unsustainable, industrial, unethical way that's not humane. So I would prefer to divorce myself from that system as much as possible. So, but as with anything in permaculture, I'm going to think about slow, small changes. So we're interested in rabbits. We've been talking about it for a couple weeks. I'm not going to jump right into it. I know for me, meat chickens is not an option. Chickens are too destructive. And I don't have the space here for them. So we do get eggs from our chickens. Same thing with goats. Like for dairy, I'm just not interested in trying to keep an animal that's probably going to be more of a disturbance than my size plot can handle. As much as I know my children would love to keep goats for dairy. So for us, rabbits seem like the most sustainable way to get meat, other than if we were to raise some more ducks. My ducks are all, at this point in time, Indian runners, which don't have very much meat. They're really an egg-laying breed. So if I were to get a heavier-bodied meat duck, or we've contemplated getting a goose, but I would like to save my neighbors all of the noise. And also, geese and my poodles probably wouldn't get along really well. So yeah, just trying to think about divorcing myself from the industrial food system in terms of following the permaculture ethics of care for the earth. So I want to use humane, sustainable agricultural practices, and then think about care for people. So the workers that are helping produce the food I eat, are they working in safe work environments, and are they paid a living wage? So those are all things we've been thinking about lately, and current situations have made it so those issues feel even more pressing. But I also want to, again, slow, small changes, and I want to really think about and investigate whether it's a good option for us. So anyway, I'm going to get back to pruning my rest of my roses before the rain comes back and weeding a little bit. And if you have thoughts about sustainable meat production, or you have experience raising your own small meat livestock or dairy livestock, I would love to hear about your experience. So please feel free and leave a comment. Share some of your wisdom with me, because that's something that I don't have experience with yet. I also wanted to say that I'm going to try and make a video once a month that's more of just a quiet tour of what's happening in the garden and what my daily chores are around here, because I've had several people ask for that kind of a video. And I've also had a lot of people on my Facebook page and on Instagram and on YouTube ask me if I could do some videos cooking with things I harvest from the garden. And I would love to do that. I have several recipes lined up, and I'm going to be doing some videos this summer where I'm cooking with produce from the garden, sharing some of that with y'all. So those are things to look forward to. All right, I hope y'all enjoy the rest of your weekend. And I'll be back. Thanks. Please don't forget to subscribe if you enjoyed it. And please share this channel with your friends if you think that it might be useful for them and they might get something out of it. That would be really awesome. So thank you.